I'm going to read from a manuscript. I was in North Carolina this fall teaching for 8 weeks, and was living in a beautiful house in the mountains by myself, and I started writing prose poems. I wrote prose poems throughout my writing life, but I never really figured out how to do it. I had wonderful teachers who wrote beautiful prose poems. Charles Simic was my teacher, and of course he won the Pulitzer for a book of prose poems. So I started writing them, and after about 3 or 4, I think I figured something out. Hey, Les. And so I'm going to read a few of these to you. This is called Tale of the Tortoise. I don't know how the tortoise got in through the fence and past the neighborhood dogs that run loose once the sun's down, but I found her near a nest of her eggs where the garden had already begun to turn to autumn. It seemed as if she'd found a home there, and who was I to tell her otherwise? So I brought her straw to make a better bed, and food I never saw her eat, but that disappeared magically from the tin plate where I left it. I don't remember now how long it took, but she kept the eggs warm until they hatched, and her many babies scrambled out in every direction until she rounded them up again into her care. Now I have to tell you that there never was a tortoise, only one that I wanted to be there. There never was a fence to crawl under or neighborhood dogs for someone to step around down the dark alley. There was no dark alley. There was no nest or eggs, no straw, no hope for anything. But I did find a tortoise in my yard one morning where it had laid its eggs in a nest it had made with mowed grass. I don't know where she came from, but perhaps she was a neighbor's pet and there was a zoo nearby. I called the police to see if they knew what to do, and they came quickly and confirmed that it was a tortoise with eggs. Sometimes you need a great story to fill a hole in your mind or to try to mend something that's been torn by a violent wave that washed through you once. There was no tortoise and no policeman. I know I have to stop doing this. I want you to believe me. It's all about the story. It's all we have. This is called At a Car Wash in Little Rock. I used to love to wash my car at night at a car wash up the street from where I lived with my wife and baby son. At night, sometimes, I need to slip away. Seldom was there anybody there. That time of night, most folks are tucked away and dreaming, so I was startled by a man's voice screaming, "Hey, asshole!" across the car wash tarmac, slashed this way and that by the streetlight's arc. I turned around as if he called to me. It had to be. We were the only ones there. And when I did, he yelled again, "No, not you, that other asshole." But he didn't say it out of disrespect, as it was more a tip of his hat because I knew who I was and had acknowledged that. "Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free nor ever chaste, except you ravish me," John Donne wrote in his beautiful poem about car washes. Listen, I'm not crazy. I know what he meant. The way you may be overwhelmed by words that come to mean something only after you felt their pain. This is called The Problem with Shapes in the Night Trees. On guard duty one night, and stoned as I could be, I took my place, mumbled to the guy I was replacing, and settled into my position. The same thing was happening all up and down the perimeter, so there was more noise than there should have been, but soon things quieted down, and after a few more minutes, I looked out at the rice fields that stretched out like a graveyard as far as I could see. I'd done this before, and sometimes under much more duress, but the Vietnam reefer had a hold of me, so I was reeling a bit and glad I could sit down. I needed to focus, so I squinted into the dark to get my night vision straight. At first, I could only barely make out the line between where the rice fields ended and the sky began as my eyes became more and more accustomed to the dark. I began to see more details. I looked and shook my head and looked again. I saw an entire platoon of North Vietnamese soldiers moving almost imperceptibly in my direction through the dark, which was everyone's direction, and my simple duty to defend, my sacred duty to defend the LZ, which I did with all my heart. I needed to alert the guy down the line, but I couldn't see him in the dark, and I didn't want to make any noise, not a sound. The problem with dark shapes in the night trees is that sometimes they're bodies. I squinted again into the dark rice fields and put my nose to the breeze until I saw the NVA soldiers transformed into water buffalo, easing through my line of fire so I could be easy as well and breathe again. But that's not the end of the story, because someone down the line at 3 a.m. pulled his claymores when some trip flares lit up our position, and I heard the sputter of rifle fire nearby, all up and down the line. As the trip flares descended among us, you could see the shapes of water buffalo in that terrible light, here and there, and then so quickly gone. A few more rounds cracked, and then it was quiet again, so I could hear a frightful baying coming from the dark, sharp cries that sounded a lot like pain to me. All I could do was stay in my position and hope whatever it was would die soon, so the sound of its dying would stop. And maybe that would be the end of it for the night. The farmer found the body even before first light and dragged the dead calf to our bunker. Its eyes were still open, so it seemed to look at me, I thought. I was 18 and didn't know much. I heard some voices raised in anger in the background. Money was involved, and then some deals made, I think, that would allow everyone safe passage out of the wreck of the waste, out of the wreck of waste the war had become. But I wasn't thinking about that. I was thinking about the bawling sound the calf had made after being torn to shreds by the claymore, where it tripped the flares in its playful romping just off some ancient path through the rice. How human the voice had sounded, and how full of longing for some kind of peace, any kind. It's from our links with other things that memory occurs. That's why they won't let go sometimes, no matter what you think or pray. And I'm going to end with this poem called Wade Park, VA. This is my Veterans Hospital in Cleveland. It's called Wade Park. I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I'll say it anyway. I love to go to the VA hospital because I love to talk with my fellow veterans there. It's amazing the conversations that I have. You know, and I'm an academic. I mean, I spent my whole life in universities and colleges, but the conversations in those halls are nowhere near as enlightening as the ones I have in the VA. Amazing stories. And all you have to do is ask. Rain slices through me as if I was the grassy field. No matter how many times you turn the key, the lock will not open. The birth of someone's hair piled high this morning on her head, which she did with her only remaining arm and hand. VA hospital, Wade Park. She's here in mental health with the rest of us, as if there were answers. There are no answers. She could have had help tying her hair up that way on top of her head. I don't think you could do that with only one hand, but I may be wrong. People under duress do amazing things to save themselves from oblivion. Back outside in the rain, nothing has changed. The woman who lost her arm to another war would not look up from the floor where she kept her eyes until the nurse called her name. She was tall when she stood up, and her hair was wildly trying to free itself from the bun she had tied it into so carefully in the morning. Another turn of the wheel, and when it comes to rest this time, someone's arm is missing, someone else's mine. Thank you.